All right, looks like we're live right now. So, hey everybody, my name is Kevin, and I'm with my really good friend Bonnie in New York, and I invited her into this curiosity conversation, which is an offshoot of an idea that Scott Glass had us do over the summer with CL MOOC to talk about digital storytelling with Bonnie. And Bonnie and I have known each other for many years, and I've always kind of looked to her as somebody who really thinks deeply about the idea of digital storytelling and how images and video and music and audio all come together. So I asked her on here because she is just back, I think last week, from a course that she went to in California to talk about what might be one of the next stages of digital storytelling around virtual reality. And so I was pretty impressed that she went there, and she's written a lot on her blog about it, but I thought I would ask her a couple questions about how it went and what she thought and how it connects to storytelling. So welcome, Bonnie.
Welcome, thank you.
So tell me a little about this course that you went to and why you went there.
You know, it's funny, I don't know anything about virtual reality. I'm not a gamer. I never put those headset things on my head. Those, yeah, I see it. But I am always interested in what's the newest kind of media connected to storytelling. So I think the VR part of the title of this course wasn't as interesting to me as the combination of VR and the storytelling of it. If I saw VR gaming, it would mean nothing to me. So really the whole world of it was pretty new. I mean, so immediately after I signed up for this course, and I just clicked around. I was just looking at Google, and I always sort of click around from time to time to look for courses because I'm always interested in digital documenting, digital literacy, storytelling, you know, sort of that all, like what's new, what's next, what new things can I learn that, you know, because I don't know, there's always new things to learn. And the only place that evidently was offering a course like this was in Berkeley. And I thought, well, you know, this was about a month ago. It was a little pricey, but I thought, you know, by December, January, it's going to be, the weather's going to be terrible. And maybe California is not going to be beach weather, but at least it'll be warmer. And also the National Writing Project Center is there. So that was sort of an offshoot of, you know, I got together with Elise and Tanya and had great dinner. So it was a great place for me just to be. And also the Center for Digital Storytelling is there. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's sort of a great sort of source that I thought, okay, this could be something new and interesting. And I was game to try it. I had the, you know, I have the time on my hands to sort of move around when I feel like it. So that's what sort of got me there. I liked, they have a new angle, and I think a lot of schools are doing it. I know the new school is starting to open up these open courses where you know, sort of, I mean, they used to have them for, you know, after grad students, just people that were interested in taking courses in areas that maybe they didn't know or they wanted to retool a little bit. So they do have a pretty extensive digital program now at the new school, but nothing in virtual reality. And I actually hadn't seen that first, but I would bet they will be starting. I mean, it's funny that in New York City, they don't have, with all the colleges they have there, they don't have virtual reality storytelling. So I would say that my feeling about this is it's very new. It's very much in the earlier stages. And it did remind me, Kevin, of being at Tech Matters 06, in Chico, California.
Which is where we met.
Right. That things in a year from now that people are struggling with will be just like a flip of the switch. So I think just from the get-go, to start this out, the people that were leading this workshop were really, really young and very passionate and had spent a lot of time messing around in this new technology for 9 months. But it did feel like they were at a place of working really hard at long rendering periods and just with a lot of patience to get to a place where they probably won't have to work so hard in the equipment in about a year.
Yeah, so the technical aspects are overshadowing probably the storytelling aspects of a
Yeah,
lot
there
of
was
ways right
no
now.
storytelling. I mean, I
Yeah.
can tell you this is
Yeah.
not about, and it could be that it was at the grad school of journalism.
Mhm.
So the storytelling was a little bit pushed to the side. We spent time sort of investigating the new equipment. They probably had gotten GoPros from GoPro, you know, because they're at the cutting edge here in learning. So the group was really interesting. As a female, being in many classes over the years, it was odd to be in a class with 14 men and 4 women. So right from this, and I think part of that is because of the virtual reality piece of it is more masculine than feminine.
Because of the gaming aspect, or
yes, because the class next door was an elementary class in video, and that was filled with women. You know, so that was like the more normal. This had a lot of, and I think too, they weren't just trying to appeal to educators, but to business people, content creators, journalists. So you got a very wide variety of people, but all the people in my group, there wasn't anybody that hadn't used Premiere. So we're already talking about using software on a more professional level.
Gotcha.
I mean, honestly, I don't use Premiere. I used to in the old days when, you know, you had to work on 2 platforms, but I was not actually willing to start relearning Premiere. So that was part of my own issue. But I could see, because I use Final Cut.
Yeah.
Which you could use Final Cut. But there, quite honestly, again, I think the issue of equipment, both the hardware and the software, takes precedence over talking about story. We talk very little about story.
So when you and I had met, you were, I can't remember, a couple years out of the Center for Digital Storytelling, perhaps.
Yeah.
And one of our discussions, which led to us still being friends, is trying to think about ways to leverage the internet to do digital storytelling, right?
Right.
And that led to us doing our collaborative ABC project, where we had, 15 to 20 people around the country making short digital storytellers that we then kind of knitted together like a big quilt of stories.
Right.
Because we were trying to think about ways, how do we bring storytelling into the idea of the web age? So I'm just curious, you know, I mean, looking down the road, do you see VR as like the potential for it, even though it's not there yet? I mean, is there a different way of telling stories with VR that you got a hint of that just makes you wonder about the possibility of storytelling?
Well, I don't think it's a universal way of telling stories, because if you go to New York Times stories, because they have 360 stories on New York Times. So we saw a number of different stories, but again, didn't see it through the goggles. So somebody else, and they were showing it on the computer. So that means somebody else is driving the story for you, because you're not, I mean, you could do it on your own computer and use your finger, you know, drive your own story.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you're not, I mean, that's 360. So you're letting control of the view. So anybody who's driving can move the cursor, can move the story anywhere they want in that 360. Well, not all the area of that 360 might be that interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the story that I loved was a story about, and it would be obvious that it was a story about a Syrian refugee young girl. The voiceover is gorgeous. It's a crafted piece of writing. You could tell right away. The sound quality is excellent. And she's taking you through a refugee camp. So everywhere you move your cursor,
You get another
it's
view.
going to be interesting. It's in a refugee camp, so
Yeah.
it's always going to help her tell her story. It's not going to pull you away from the story in any way.
Yeah. It occurs to me that, I mean, this probably is obvious though, that one of the aspects of VR and storytelling though is that idea of the viewer has agency that they don't have in normal video, right? So if I'm watching a YouTube video, I'm at the mercy of whoever shot that in a lot of ways, I guess. Well, and then with VR though, because I can, if it's done right, move around the environment, I can kind of see more, and I am choosing what I want to look at. Now, I'm still at the mercy of whatever was shot originally, correct? But
Right.
still, that idea of breaking down the barrier between the maker and the viewer, I think, is an interesting kind of aspect of potential aspect, I guess, of kind of the VR idea.
Right, but I think like I always like the pieces where the environment that people were still telling their story in was interesting story. If you're just like in an empty building and you're sort of moving around the rooms and you like go, okay, what am I doing in these rooms? It's not that interesting. You're gonna click off the story. You're just
Yeah.
gonna get out of it. Nothing is gonna hold your attention. But if somebody's telling a story of being in the woods, and wherever you take wherever you're moving is probably going to be interesting and enhancing the story. It's not going to distract you. But if you were in a city and the soundtrack in the back was pulling you away from the story, I would get confused, like I think you still need to find an environment that really works to enhance your story. I think like anything else.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say too is that story is still the kind of the heart of it all. Like
It is.
you don't have a story to tell, and you're using VR. Well, it might be cool for a couple of minutes, but it's not gonna resonate with you. It's
Right.
Well, we're always looking for what's the heart of what I'm looking at or reading, and then of course thinking of teaching too, of how do we teach our students to kind of know that story is the heart of so much of what we do.
Right. And I would say that I was in a team. They set the teams up. I have no idea, but I was very happy when I saw who I had. I had two guys. One was from Brazil. He was a TV producer on a very well-established Brazilian TV show that has a very large population, very large viewing populations. It's 2.5 hours. So on the face of it, it sounded really interesting, but from this guy's perspective, it's sort of old-fashioned TV variety show, and it's tough for him as a younger person engaged in social media who wants to set the world on fire with new technologies, and the producers are going, hey, hang on, our people, our advertising budget comes from these people who are happy with the status quo.
Yeah.
So that was one guy, and he was also used to being a journalist, to doing interviews in a journalistic kind of way. The other guy was somebody who's probably in his early to mid 30s, found a college in New York that was going to teach him on the spot, on the site, how to make movies. That's what he was passionate about. I mean, Kevin, honestly, isn't it? Maybe if we had it to do over again, that's what we would want.
Maybe.
So he could put on his headphones, create a beautiful piece of technology, of story. And he would say the same thing. He bought, there's a camera called a Ricoh, and it's about $300. It's a 360 camera, and you don't have to learn this particular technique of stitching. So it's an automatic 360.
Does it for you, okay? Yeah.
The stitching thing, we spent 2 days on stitching. I mean, this guy also had figured it out very fast. But his attitude was he didn't care if the quality of the video, because a camera on the low end, obviously the resolution is not going to be as, excellent as the high end, which are like $5, $15, $20,000 for the whole setup.
Mm-hmm.
That big ad companies are using. But his attitude was it's all about story. So he was more concerned about having good sound equipment than video equipment. So he already had that Ricoh. It's a tiny little thing. You could take it with you anywhere. It gives you the 360, and you don't have to bother wasting all this time with the stitching.
So maybe that's where the technology will go, right? The
Right.
auto stitching.
And he said, look, I always want a piece of equipment that's going to be simple.
Yeah, I hear that.
And it's not going to be expensive, because you're not going to have it for that long.
Mm-hmm.
For $300, you're not probably going to have this piece for too long, but it's going to take you through those initial stages. Now, software will cost more money, because in addition to Premiere, you also need this kind of technology, that does stitching, but also sort of prepares the video to then bring into Premiere. There's the extra steps along the way that a company called Kollor uses, Kollor or something like that. A lot of it is also connected to the Adobe suite.
Yeah.
Like that's where a lot of people are using it too. It just felt to me that unless, yes, I think this is going to be something really interesting, and what is moving all of this is the fact that the gaming world has really started it, has inspired people moving in other directions with 360.
Yeah, with all the VR headsets and everything going on.
Yes, that the equipment is all there, and the software is now sort of coming into, the consumer hand. But it feels this was the first long, extended course that they taught in virtual reality. And it's really probably not in too many places yet. So they don't really have a handle on where story fits in. Because we were on the Berkeley campus. So they set up, they were very organized, and they had a lot of people, so that when people started having trouble, there was always somebody right there. I mean, that was probably part of the expense of the course.
Yeah.
That there was, and they were all cool. There was nobody being arrogant or, I have the answers. And when people would start saying, well, what about this? What about that? The two instructors were very cool about, engaging with anybody who had a question or a comment or feedback. They were totally open, which, again, it's not usually my experience that people necessarily are quite so open like that. But I think unless you're willing to sort of sit there while the computer is rendering, because it takes, because we're talking about a lot of video that needs to be rendered.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little quirks along the way that'll bounce you out, that you're going to have to redo it again. I mean, it definitely sounds like Tech Matters 06, right?
Yeah, and I think it sounds like that, again, that the potential's there, but the technology isn't. I'm just thinking of, at Tech Matters, actually, I brought a little camera I had. You remember that? I took pictures of your eyes. And the sound quality was awful, and the video was really kind of low scale. But at the time, though, I was like, this little camera allows me to shoot video on the go, which, of course, today is like, so what? I pull out my phone. But at that point, remember, that was pretty amazing that those were kind of coming into the market. And, I mean, who knows whether virtual reality would kind of stick beyond the kind of gaming helmet kind of platform. But I know Google's investing in it because they've been putting out some of their 360 animated movies that are kind of interesting to look at.
I mean, I would definitely have my ears open for the next thought about this, because there's no writing at all. And I very politely said, I mean, one of the instructors came over and said, so what are you thinking about? So I said, you know, I noticed that, you know, there's no writing going on here. Don't you think maybe, because they gave you the story. They sent you to a shoot.
Yeah.
We actually had the most interesting place because we interviewed a guy who's in marketing at their science center, one of their science museums, up high. So you have the view of the whole valley.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this incredibly gorgeous modern building, and it's a hands-on science museum for kids. So any room you walk into, and there's many rooms there you go. You got your story, because in 360,
It's beautiful, right?
wherever it's going to land,
there's something to see,
wherever
right?
you're going to move, it's going to be interesting. And they only wanted 1 minute of story. So you interviewed the guy. So we did the shoot. I honestly stepped back because those two guys are so used to doing shoots, interviewing formally, moving the camera around, you know, using the mics that they had, you know, and knowing that in 1 minute you had to be very conservative about how much video you were shooting, because it would just be that much more effort to
later on.
edit it. So I sort of hung back. I did what I sort of assisted them where I could. So it was, our story was like the three of us, you know, like there wasn't any story there wasn't any talk about what story that you would want to, you know, it was none of that. There was not even a reflection time. So I said to them, I said, maybe it would be good to start the day with some writing, because the days always started, Kevin, late, because there was always some screw up in even getting getting their LCD projectors to work. Always. So in that time, we just sort of hung out and sort of worked.
Get them writing into the day, right?
Right. It would have been so easy. And everybody would have felt better, because these are all people with writers' background. These are all journalists or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was just nothing like that. There was nothing at the end of the day to sort of process what you had done, what questions, with any. And I said, just basic. And the girls, you know, the woman that I talked to said, that's a good idea. Like thinking, like, you wouldn't have thought of that, you know?
Yeah. Well, we know the power of writing for sure.
Yes, and I think in their defense, because this was the first, and they're going to keep doing it. Obviously, they had 18 people in the class, and the other class was pretty full too. So they must be doing something right, you know, because they sort of resurrected an old program that I think was dying. And they brought in some new people. They did this marketing. Like, if you look at this school, just the online visual of how it looks really cool. Like, you want to participate. So I have no regrets. I mean, I came away with no product. But at some point, I just thought, you know, I personally have been in those shoes where I was ready to jump in and like start wasting my time. But when I heard them start talking, like, well, probably in a year, which means if they're estimating in a year,
couple
it's
years
going to be less.
Yeah.
And you could get a camera that you don't need to learn the stitching.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, then this is not where my priority is, because I'd buy the camera.
Yeah.
But tell me, all right, let's talk about a little bit more interesting things. All right. Because if you're not talking about story, I don't know what's the point. Yeah. I mean, for me, the point is never the software or the equipment. It's not. Yes, that's important, but I need that piece of story to drive me.
I think we're going to end there, Bonnie, because that's like a perfect way to end. In interest of time, that's like a perfect one, I think.
All right, good.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, and it was a pleasure. So, yeah, I'm going to try to share this with the CL MOOC and the network narrative, and back with you too, of course. But it was great hanging out with you.
Always.
Yeah. Okay, hold on a second, okay?
Yeah.